process is to negate those sins which caused the destruction of the temple. And briefly, the most telling factor that caused the destruction of the temple was hatred. People didn't get along with each other. They didn't trust each other. And as such, killed each other, mistrusted each other, could not rely upon each other, and wanted to force their opinions upon others. There were a group of zealots who wished to destroy the Romans and believed they could. But most of the population believed that fighting the Romans was futile. So what did these zealots do? They burned down the storehouses of Jerusalem so that the people would have no other recourse but to fight. Fight they did. But it's very difficult to fight without food, without heat, without oil. Defenders fought valiantly, but the zealots made the defense of Jerusalem an impossibility. It was hatred that caused it, and only love can reconstruct it. From the point of view of the time, of the perspective of looking from the distance, we see how the whole thing evolved. We see what brought the process on, and therefore we have to change our attitudes in order to reverse the pattern of what has happened from the process. We were arrogant and cocky. We had been restored to our holy land by the statements of God through the prophets. We had become a society like all other societies, a nation like all other nations. We had a national identity, however. The national identity was we were a nation of scholars, a nation who worshiped God in one temple and excelled in acts of loving kindness. Somewhere along the line, our national identity changed. And we tried to curry favor with other nations to be like those other nations. And so therefore, the process is not just to change the acts, and not just to change hatred. These were symptoms of a worse malady. We lost our moral compass. We lost our national identity. We focused on the wrong things. We try to be like anybody else. And we're not like everyone else. When we realize that we're not like everyone else, that we have an ideology given to us called the Torah by God. These are God-given laws. And the purpose of the Torah is not just to be happy with our own spiritual development, but to become the beacon of light for the whole world by following the Torah. When we realize who we are, what our purpose is, and recapture that spark and that enthusiasm of national purpose, that will correct the errors that brought about the sins of the past. It's not enough just to focus on the sins. You have to focus on the causes of the sins, the ideas behind it. Change the way our mind thinks, to have more of Gaon Yankiv, the glory of Jacob, not trying to please everyone else, trying to please only God. And when we please God, we will ultimately please man. A third perspective is an altogether different perspective. Destruction is part of construction. You can't build a new building without destroying the old. Trying to put a modern-day building, modern-day skyscraper, on a Victorian-era home is an impossibility. One's architecture does not fit in with the others. And in order to develop new architecture with new ideas and new construction and new principles of design, you have to raise the old building. And in raising the old building, the raising is not destruction, but it's constructive, so that something else will replace it. Our old selves, when we came to rebuild the temple, was quite good. We were a great nation, a great group of people. We had scholars and saints and judges. We had men who were prophets. We had leaders and kings and priests. We were filled with our own enthusiasm and purpose. But it wasn't good enough. We did not reach the level necessary that God had foreseen was our potential. And as such, the level that we attained had to be removed in order for us to explore and find the godliness that's within us, in order to seek out a different identity, in order to see within ourselves that we had greater powers and greater heights to reach. The destruction of the temple and the exile is the process of becoming self-aware, the process of becoming what we can become. Now, I know that took a long time. Self-actualization is not something that comes automatically. But whenever something negative happens, you lost your job, a relationship became soured, you got into a fight with your best friend, there's a reason why those things happen. And the ultimate reason is to get you to a different perspective, to make you to something that you weren't at that moment. We relied too much upon others. We relied too much upon natural power. We relied too much even on our intellectual gifts. We could not see the spiritual dynamo that lied within each one of us and the connection that we had with God. The whole purpose of the golut is to discover the soul of Judaism, known as the Kabbalah, and developed and articulated with the Hasidic doctrine. And as we absorb the Hasidic doctrine and the teachings of Kabbalah and become the kinds of people that the Kabbalah teaches, there will be no need for galus. We will have become what God wants, and there will be no purpose in keeping us in fetters.